All right, one of the biggest global stories remains the fallout from the G7 summit and President Trump's confrontation with key U.S. allies, especially Canada. The consequences of the dispute are not just economic, but bad relations with U.S. allies actually means an impact on U.S. national security. Back with me once again is Natasha Bertrand, staff writer for The Atlantic, and joining us is Malcolm Nance, MSNBC's terrorism and intelligence analyst. Malcolm, let me begin with you. We've obviously talked about the G7 from an economic perspective, what this means for our trade. We talk about tariffs, but I want you to give us a different perspective. How much do we rely on our allies for key intelligence, and how does something that what we witnessed over the past 24 hours endanger, or how does it endanger that intelligence partnership?
Well, it's absolutely critical that we have these deep international relationships with key allies. A good example of how this impacts our national security is the morning after 9/11, when we were struck by Al-Qaeda terrorists. It was Canada, the Canadian ambassador to the United States, who invoked Article 5 of the NATO Charter, bringing about all 28 nations to come to the aid and rescue of the United States after it had been attacked. And Canada has men in combat in Afghanistan. They are still with us in Afghanistan, and until recently they were fighting with us alongside us in Iraq. When we fray these relationships, when we attack our own allies, we lose our greatest strength that we fought and had men die for in World War II, which was to create an international order that is rules-based and in which all of us have collective security, not just individual security.
And Natasha, to that point about the relationship, especially on the security and intelligence front, the president always, makes the narrative that the United States is being taken advantage of, certainly economically, certainly with the issue of trade. But when it comes to security and intelligence, is it an equal playing field? Do they need more of our intelligence than we need more of theirs, or how do you see it?
Well, there's no doubt that the U.S. intelligence apparatus is the best in the world, but there are significant ways that other countries do help the U.S. in terms of intelligence gathering, in terms of, disrupting terrorism, recruiting sources, geographic access by the U.S. to other countries where there might be, a stake or a national security interest by the United States. I mean, these are all, it's a really, really common practice for the U.S. to share intelligence with its allies, but it's also a very delicate one, and it relies a lot on trust. And I think that one of the biggest issues that we saw arise out of this came last year when the president was in the Oval Office with the Russian ambassador and the Russian foreign minister, and he disclosed intelligence that was given to the United States by the Israelis, and the Israelis then changed the way that they then shared intelligence with the United States. So even, the president has shown a track record for this kind of thing before, and now that he's drifting closer and closer towards Vladimir Putin, Kim Jong Un, and farther away from the G7 and from allies that we've had for hundreds of years, I mean, this is something that's going to really start to erode the trust that these countries have in the president's ability to keep his mouth shut.
So to that point, Malcolm, not only will it erode the confidence of our allies in trusting the president to keep his mouth shut, do you think this will give our allies a pause the next time there is a military operation and we need the support of our allies? I think of Iraq and Afghanistan. I've spent a lot of time in both. I've seen, European, Canadian troops on the ground fighting alongside Americans trying to stabilize those countries. Are they going to be less likely to go with us on one of these operations next time?
Well, no. At the level 0 level, that's the street level where we're carrying out tactical, regional, and theater operations. Those relationships are going to endure. As a matter of fact, the only adult left in the room now in the White House is Secretary of Defense Mattis. And he is a no-nonsense former Marine general who is running the Defense Department the way it generally should be run. And he's keeping those relationships. The problem is he has to go around like a nursemaid and assure all of our allies that the relationships, whether it's operational security, whether it's intelligence, the things that we cannot trust the president on, are secure when they come to the Pentagon. It's the more covert operations, the very, very clandestine operations that they would carry out, where they would need some form of operational support from the CIA or NSA, in which it would have to require a National Command Authority signature. That's the president's authorization for these national mission unit missions. Those are the ones that our allies are really going to think twice about before they cooperate with us.
Natasha, very quickly, and we only have about like 10 seconds. Do you think there's any, are you at all surprised that Republicans have not been more critical of this president on the world stage, the way he's alienated our allies?
No, given their track record in failing to kind of, hold the president accountable for any of the actions that he's taken that are fairly unprecedented, this is not surprising in the least.
All right, Natasha Bertrand calling it as she sees it, very bluntly. Malcolm Nance, Natasha Bertrand, thank you both very much.